The Buddha taught that there are 4 notions that cause us to experience suffering in the mundane world. What are those 4 notions, you might ask? Well, that is taking that which is impure to be pure. Taking that which is the nature of suffering to be happiness. Taking that which is no self to be self. And taking that which is impermanent to be permanent. And in terms of taking that which is impure to be pure, then, for example, we see this body to be something pure, especially if it's the body or form of something we desire. For example, our lover. We take their body and form to be something pure and beautiful, and we are attached to it. But what the Buddha taught was that this body was nothing other than a bag of filth wrapped in skin. It is taught that the body is filled by the 36 impure substances. For example, blood and pus, lymph, excrement and urine, etc. But we don't perceive the impurity of the body. Quite the opposite, we see it to be something pure. And when it comes to our own body, then that's something that we cherish and pamper. We go to great expense to take care of our body, keeping it clean and smelling nice with perfumes and soaps. But if you just look underneath the skin, then what we find is that it is nothing but a disgusting bag of filth. We see the body to be beautiful and pure, and naturally, being impermanent, then we experience aging, sickness and death. And so as our looks fade and our health deteriorates, it causes us much greater suffering than if we originally were to identify that this body itself is not something pure. And likewise, when it comes to taking that which is the nature of suffering to be happiness, believing that these objects of desire, the 5 outer sense objects, are something that brings us joy and happiness, then we don't recognize how the source of true happiness and well-being does not arise from our attachment. As you remember, then there are the 3 types of suffering. The suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering of the composite. And so, although we may gain some temporary happiness and well-being from placating our desires for beautiful forms, sumptuous aromas, etc., by feeding our desire, we only cause ourselves further suffering in future times. This craving or desire is taught to be like a thirst for salt water. The more salt water you drink, the more thirsty you become. If we pander to our likes and dislikes, then this only makes us more small-minded and makes it more difficult for us to achieve tranquility and peace of mind. The third mistaken notion is this notion that takes what is no self to be self. And this term, self, really means identity. So we identify with ourselves as an individual, and we cling to the notion of this being something substantial. But in reality, then the Buddha taught that this clinging to a notion of a self is the fundamental cause of all our suffering. And it's because of our desire to protect this self that we cherish and that which we possess, then we engage in all kinds of negative karma. And it is this karma that will cause us to experience unhappiness in future times. So what we perceive to be naturally or substantially happy eventually brings about our own downfall. The 4th mistaken notion is the notion that takes that which is impermanent to be permanent. And as is taught in the Buddha Dharma, then all composite phenomena are impermanent and not lasting. Although we understand that one day we will die and that every day we grow older, in reality, we act like someone who doesn't believe in the impermanence of self and phenomena. We have this inherent notion that the things we love will always bring us happiness, and also that they will never run out. And by clinging to this false notion of permanence, then we only exacerbate our problems in future times. There's nothing in this world that lasts, not even the mountains and oceans. And likewise, you won't find anything in the universe that is permanent and unchanging. But these are all points that I've covered in previous videos. Our notions of self, permanence, well-being, and purity. But there's another very difficult point here. And that's because, although in all of the foundation levels of Buddha Dharma, it teaches that we should not cling to these four things: purity, well-being, self, and permanence. In the final view, as represented in the middle way, it teaches of the sublime purity, sublime happiness, sublime self, and sublime permanence. And on the outside, then it would seem that these teachings are completely in contradiction to everything that came before as we progress through the various levels of the philosophical tenet of the Buddha Dharma. And so the question is, what does this relate to? This sublime purity, sublime bliss or well-being, sublime self, and sublime permanence. Well, these teachings come from the Uttara Tantra. That's the Highest Yoga Tantra. And the Highest Yoga Tantra is the Tantra that teaches the truth of the Buddha nature. You could say Buddha nature, or you could say ultimate bodhicitta, or the Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And so the question you might ask is, well, if Buddhists believe in such a thing, then how does this significantly differ from the belief in a God that is permanent, pure, and unchanging? And although this is a very difficult point to comprehend, the first thing you have to understand is that in the Buddha Dharma, we do not believe in the substantial existence of any phenomena. As you've heard me mention many times before, then the final view of the Buddha Dharma is a view of the middle way. That's the middle way that is free from the two extremes of existence and non-existence. But likewise, you could say that this middle way is the view that does not hold to the existence of things, the non-existence of things, things being neither existent nor non-existent, or things being both existent and non-existent. At this point, you wouldn't be blamed if you came to the conclusion that in the Buddha Dharma, then they're just making things up. They're just trying to be contradictory. But I have to tell you, from my own experience, that's not the case. If you want to gain greater insight into the meaning of this, the view that is free of all elaborations, then there's one place you need to look, and that is the teachings on the highest continuum, or the Highest Yoga Tantra. So that's about all I had to say on this topic today. It's a nice sunny day. I thought I'd go out for a quick walk and just share a few of my thoughts. So until next time, then see you later.